Well, I've got a lot that I want to cover today. This video might end up being an hour long, hopefully only half an hour or so. But just to give you an idea up front of all the things I plan to cover in this video, so that for anyone short on time that just kind of wants cliff notes, I'm going to talk mainly about the shadow mask effect within, emulating arcade games, like in MAME. And I'm going to discuss my methods to try to see, how good you can get a shadow mask to look. What are the possibilities? What are the limitations? What are the different approaches? You know, I'm going to talk all kinds of shadow mask stuff today, but I'm also going to give you a quick rundown of how to use not only just HLSL effects approach, which I've done in the past, but also I'm going to discuss a little bit of using OpenGL, Sling, GLSL shaders, and Bgfx a little bit within MAME. But let's get right to it. So CRTs would work to where, in order to produce a color image, you'd have these electron guns that are red, green, and blue shoot beams of light onto these colored phosphor dots that are in this delta triangular pattern. And in order to focus the beam so it's not just a big washed out mess, they'd use this kind of, thing called a shadow mask. And it's basically just a thin piece of metal with holes punched in it. And so what that does is just help to focus, so the blue ends up reversed on the bottom here, red ends up reversed over there on the right, the green reversed over there to the left, and you get these nice little focused lit up phosphor dots right before your screen. And you can make just about any color with red, green, and blue phosphor dots. And if we come over here, zoom in on this mouse cursor here, this is, we all know what a normal pointy arrow mouse cursor looks like. It's white, but if you were to zoom in close enough on a CRT, you'd be able to see the colored phosphors in their delta pattern that are lit up by the electron guns through a shadow mask filter. So anyways, you'd be able to make out, there's red, there's green, there's blue, and they're all lit up because when you combine them all, you get white at a distance when you're far enough away. If it was supposed to, instead of be a white arrow, maybe it was supposed to be a red arrow, then you wouldn't have the blue and the green dots lit up here. They would have been kind of blacked out. Of course, for black, none of the dots are lit up, so on and so forth. It's a combination of phosphor dots being lit and to generate different colors and brightnesses and things like that. But normally you would never see it like this. You'd see it so far away that it would just look like a nice white arrow. Now with arcade games, what's more important? For it to look the way it does at your normal viewing distance, or for it to look accurate when zoomed in unnaturally close as well? Well, in a perfect world, it would look both. You'd be able to, just like on a real CRT arcade monitor, at a distance, something like a white arrow would look like a white arrow, and if you were to stick your face right up to the screen with a magnifying glass, you could see all the little red, green, and blue phosphor dots that comprise the image of the white arrow. And you go, oh, perfect. It looks accurate up close, and it looks nice and accurate at a distance, and everybody wins. But when you're not using an arcade CRT monitor, when you're playing at home on like an LCD flat screen, you just can't have that perfectly. People have tried, but it's always a gimmick, it's always fake, it's not real. Because you have, on a liquid crystal display, it's more like this up close, or, here's a CRT slot mask up close. Here's the three different types. I better cover this real quick just to make more sense. Well, it's not an LCD listed here, but you guys know what the LCD looks like. It's actually similar to the Aperture-Grille. Here's the LCD up close. So anyways, you get your three different types of shadow masks. Remember earlier we talked about, how a shadow mask basically is used to focus the electron gun's light onto the phosphor dots. Well, you've got your three types. Originally they're on the right over here. You had your normal shadow mask that give you that delta dot mask effect to create the colors and the images. Well, eventually Sony, that was, I think, shadow mask, the dot mask was like an RCA invention around 1950 or 60, around that time, maybe earlier, I don't know. Well, they had a patent on it, and Sony didn't want to pay for that. They wanted their own, patent, so they didn't have to pay royalties, I guess. They used their own technology, and they thought they could do better, and they invented the one that's in the center here called the Aperture-Grille. Instead of the little phosphor dots, you get these vertical phosphor lines that would be lit up through a different method, instead of like a shadow mask that had the little holes punched through. You had the Aperture Grill, which was just, as you can see right here on the left, it was basically, vertical slots. And it had a brighter image, but it was only in Sony televisions, not so much arcades. So we're not going to focus on Aperture Grill today. If you had a Sony television playing your old Sega Genesis games or something like that, for example, at home, and you wanted to emulate the proper Aperture Grill look to match that Sony television, then yeah, you want to use like Aperture Grill shaders. But for MAME, for arcade, you didn't have Sony Trinitrons in the arcades. And that's what this technology was called. The Aperture Grill is just the mask, but the technology was called Trinitron by Sony, and they had a patent on it until I think 96 or so. And then this shadow mask effect owned by RCA was the original. And then they wanted to compete with Sony's new thing, so the Trinitron. So they invented the slot mask, which is, I think they coined it as chroma clear, which is comparable to the brightness of the Aperture Grill, but it's a different technology, a different patent. And this kind of became a little more popular in the arcades and home televisions that were not Sony products. And I'm not sure, even though you see the little arcade thumbnail at top left to the left of slot mask here, I'm not sure if all raster games were really slot mask technology or if there were some dot mask, shadow masks. I know, like, typically, your computer monitors were, like, you see a little thumbnail out. But people disagree, and I don't know if there was a nice mixture of both, slot and dot shadow mask in the arcades. But the consensus tends to be that the slot mask was more common in the arcades. But I've found plenty of people who disagree, who said, no, the dot mask, shadow mask was present in the arcades as well. And some very popular and well-educated shader creators have used both. For instance, Timothy Lotz. Timothy Lotz, he's not just some regular dude who creates shaders or whatever. Timothy Lotz is a very intelligent engineer, programmer, or whatever, who has worked for NVIDIA and AMD. He invented fast approximate anti-aliasing, FXAA. He also invented temporal anti-aliasing. So this guy's, you got to put some respect on his name. Now, Timothy Lotz has created some shader effects to try to emulate CRTs, including the slot mask effect and the standard dot mask shadow mask effect. And you can find his shaders around. Typically, though, you find them for OpenGL platforms such as in RetroArch, the GLSL shaders using OpenGL. Now, and they look great. Maybe not perfect. Again, I don't think you could ever get it perfect because no matter what you do, it's never going to look exactly like a CRT because you don't have the light coming through your LCD display being lit up legitimately through phosphor dots or phosphor slots. Basically it's completely artificial. We really have our image lit up through the LCD crystal array, and then what ends up happening is, as a gimmick sort of, we just have something like this arrayed over top of it. It's never going to look perfect, you know what I mean? Because all the lights are just going to, the red, the green, and the blue are always going to be the same, in the effect to reproduce it. It's not like oh, because this image is red, only the red's lit up and the other ones are blacked out. Because if you like go to MAME and you let me put on where I have what I finally created as a perfect, find perfect, here it is, perfect. Excuse me. Perfect shadow mask triad. Here we go, perfect slot mask. Let's go with that one. Now I'm going to zoom in really close here somewhere. Okay. Now what you can see, comparing it over here to what a slot mask is supposed to look like by default in MAME before it's tiled across the screen, you see your red, green, and blue phosphor patterns and a little bit of the breakup in between because, again, it was light shining through a metal plate with the slots, cut out and the beams arrayed so that, they would hit, not converged, but a little bit separately. But it wouldn't look like this, even though let's just look at what this looks like in MAME applied correctly up close, So this is kind of a white area, so you just see your plain, red, green, and blue. But you also see how faded out they are. And the reason they fade out is different than the reason they'd fade out on a real CRT monitor, because a real CRT monitor, they wouldn't be faded out to create white. They would all be lit as bright as possible to create white. You know what I'm saying? So it's still a gimmick. It's an effect, This is obviously not 100% accurate, but it's the best that MAME can do using HLSL. Okay. Now, moving over to the perfect shadow mask triad, like this kind of effect right here, where it's supposed to be the three dots, where you have a red, a green, and a blue, from the three electron guns. Although these don't look like dots to me, they look like square tiles, so that's another problem. The resolution just isn't good enough. Now, if you had like an 8K monitor, then maybe you could do something. But, for like 1080p or 1440p, maybe even for 4K, you're not going to get something that looks like perfect little dots anyways. But applied correctly, it would look something like this. So you can see you have your, get my little pen out. Maybe it'll let me draw on this. Let me draw on. Yeah, okay. So right here you've got the green one inside of this black circle I'm drawing, But right next to that you've got the blue one. Oops. Let me switch from pen to pencil there. Okay. So inside here you've got a blue. Inside here you've got the green. And maybe like above it you'd have your red. Oops, whatever, you get it. You get the idea. Whatever. So that's like you're supposed to be like the delta pattern, like 1 pixel. And it's just arrayed across. It's not perfect, but that's what you get in MAME with HLSL trying to emulate that effect. There's also one for, let's see, where is it? Aperture, Sony Trinitron. Okay. So this is like your Sony Trinitron aperture look within MAME, the best you can do when you're doing it accurately. With Scanlines, no curves. Do I have one with no Scanlines? No curves or Scanlines. I wasn't focused on aperture, so I don't think I do. It's a dot mask one. Slot, I was scan, final with curves and integer. Anyways, I don't want to waste too much time on some of these things right now. I can get back into this in a minute. But let's see. So anyways, moving on. Another important thing to consider, this is a close-up of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but it's upscaled on a modern LCD. And if you look at the waterfalls, they just look like, white and different shades of blue pixels coming down vertical stripes. But on the original hardware, on a real CRT, you get this, a nice smooth sheets of water in a transparent kind of glassy effect. And the reason you did was because the resolution was so much lower and there was like diffusion and stuff like that that the modern display can't account for without shaders, you know. So this is like a issue of dithering and NTSC composite cables and CRT monitor technology all combined. So depending on, you know, the effects used, you could have something that doesn't even look like the artist's original intent unless you get it just right. So this is the kind of work that's very difficult to kind of figure out properly, and there's always going to be compromises to be made. Let's go over here to this page. Okay, so moving on, let's zoom this over here somewhere. You can have artifacts because when you try to reproduce something like a slot mask, if you are using a low 1080p resolution, because when you zoom in close, you know, instead of, you know, RGB, you end up with like magenta, and green, and stuff like that. Or even when you get it right, like down here, you know, someone who's figured out a workaround, you know, due to subpixel size on LCD resolutions, you get banding effects at a distance. I don't know if you guys can see that in the video, but there's this moire banding effects everywhere on it. And if you zoom in close enough, the banding goes away. And if you zoom in really close, you can actually see the RGB pattern looks pretty good. You know, somebody worked really hard to get this. But at a distance, oh god, you got some more array banding effects and stuff. And then, you know, so it's like a choice of, well, what would I rather see, you know? If I'm far away, or I might see banding, but up close with a magnifying glass, it would look great. But, you know, who's going to play like that? So that could be a compromise where you might not even want your, you know, slot mask effect on because you're never going to see it. You're not going to be having your face on the screen with a magnifying glass, but you will see a darker screen and these weird banding effects at a distance, especially if you upload gameplay to like YouTube and somebody was watching it on a tiny cell phone screen. All they're going to see is the moire banding effects. They're never going to see the shadow mask at all because it's just way too far away and too low resolution anyways. So a lot of people just say, you know what, I'm just not even going to bother with shadow masks. And I was one of those people back in the day because pretty much, like, you know, all my stuff's going on YouTube, and then people are going to watch it on their little cell phone screens for the most part, and all they're going to see if I have shadow mask enabled with screen curvature and all that is moire banding effects, you know, like artifacts. And they would never see the proper shadow mask anyways because it's just not going to be zoomed in like that. Even if you're sitting right in front of your screen at a normal playing distance, you're never going to see it. But if you don't have it at all, it also doesn't look proper either. Because when you're at an actual arcade, even though you're not playing with your face against the glass, you can still perceive a little bit of something there, you know. And if you did lean in, you would see it. So it looks too flat and blank and lifeless without some kind of shadow mask, you know. The trick is getting it to look right at different distances, if possible at all. And then people have experimented with different ways to get it better and better and better and better. Now this is starting to look pretty good. And then even if you had an 8K monitor, look how good it can get. This is impressive. That looks amazing. That is one heck of a good slot mask. But who's got 8K monitors that they're playing on? So that's that's another issue. So, and what does that look like really far away? It looks so good up close. But really far away, I don't know. I'd have to see it, you know. So, but I don't have an 8K monitor. So, anyways, different people have tried different things, and Lots seems to have a good balance. And remember, the Lots guy, he invented FXAA and TAA. This guy works for NVIDIA and AMD. He's not just some regular dude. So, you, like I said, you got to kind of respect his effort, you know, because he really has put a lot of effort into trying to understand how to reproduce good pixel art that mimics CRT effects. And if he can't do it, it's like, who can? You know what I'm saying? So the first thing you think is, all right, well, let me download some Lots shaders and, you know, take a screenshot and zoom in and see what we can do. Now, in MAME, if you're using HLSL effects and you go looking around for Lots, you know, Timothy Lots HLSL settings, You're not going to find any. At least I never did. I don't think he's ever made any, and no one's ever tried to make any LOTS HLSL effects. However, I did today, so at the end of the video, I'll share my LOTS lookalike HLSL effects, at least the best I can do. So anyways, it's like you can't find LOTS HLSL. Well, like I say, I made some, so I can get download link to those at the end of the video. But what can you find? Well, can you find LOTS Bgfx? I don't know. Bgfx, let's take a look. For anyone wondering, like, well, what's Bgfx? Let me zoom in here so people who might be watching on a cell phone can actually read some of this really tiny text. Bgfx post-processing options. All you have to do is just leave this the way it is. Bgfx, auto, excuse me, screen chains are on default. Shadow mask, PNG, I guess that means it's trying to use the dot mask, Delta Trio, but you could change it to slot mask. So you could try both. And so anyways, that's that. But if you go down to your HLSL, you want to disable. So put that at a 0 because we're not going to use HLSL. We're going to use Bgfx. And then we come back up to look for where it's going to say Direct 3D. I'm not used to being this zoomed into my mame.ini notepad. So just went right past it somewhere. There we go. OSD video options. So you got to change it from Direct 3D, which is used with HLSL, to Bgfx. Okay. And that's all you got to do. So go ahead and save that. Okay, let's go ahead and launch MAME. So we're going to launch up MAME. I'm going to get that volume down and hit the tilde key and just go down one. Now see where it says window 0, screen 0, effect default. What we're going to do is, actually let me get it on the character select screen so it's similar to all the other screenshots I've been taking all day. Okay, now I'm going to go through those effects. And just so you see a different windowed version, if you go to slider options, you see normally below the line you'd have your HLSL effects. Instead, this is all you have. But let's go ahead and get out of that menu and use the tilde key so we can watch the screen while we're doing it. Okay, so if I could go left and right to go through the effects. So first I'm going to go all the way left. No effects, unfiltered MAME. Go to the right one screen. This is called CRT Geometry Deluxe. Okay, it looks pretty dark. I'm not that happy with the effect. I think it's pretty good, it's pretty interesting, but it could be better. If we were to zoom in, would we see the shadow mask looking proper? Probably, because the guy who made this, does try to go for accuracy, but at a distance, because remember, it is a gimmick. It's not like the dot mask is really on our screen. We don't have the hardware. We don't have an actual CRT with lit up little phosphor dots in that delta pattern. Instead, it's just an overlay, which just darkens the screen. So, yeah, and this darkens it quite a lot. At my distance, sitting right in front of I don't see the moire wavy line artifact pattern. But if you're watching this video later on a little phone screen, maybe you do. I don't know. I'd have to wait till later when this video is uploaded and watch it on my phone screen. All right, we'll keep going. This one's called CRT Geometry instead of the Deluxe variant, which looks like the Deluxe has bloom, perhaps. And then this one maybe no bloom, so it runs easier. Bgfx is known for being easier to run than HLSL typically, so, maybe less effects. All right, we'll keep going. This is default. This looks like filtered Bgfx default. So if you go all the way to the left, this is nothing, just unfiltered, ugly, upscaled MAME with nothing. And then if you go over 2, 3, there. Now this is your default Bgfx filter, which isn't completely pixelated, upscaled mess like unfiltered. It has a little bit of a filtering to it. but there's no scan lines, there's no shadow mask, or at least I can't detect anything like that. Looks like it's basically just like a bilinear filter or something. All right, keep on going. So this is called Super Eagle. Never been a fan of it. It's been around for a very long time. Um, it does the opposite of becoming more and more close to reality and accuracy. It just makes it look less accurate almost, because everything looks like it's just painted over with a big colored marker. Never been too much of a fan, but it definitely can get rid of jaggies, but at what cost, right? You lose the accuracy of the image. And then this is called HLSL. I don't know why they did that. I guess what they did probably for this is to apply the HLSL's scan line effect and the HLSL's shadow mask effect, which I guess you could have changed earlier when we saw under Bgfx options. It said shadow mask effect was shadow mask, but could have changed it to slot mask or Aperture-Grille maybe, and then that could have an effect here. But this is called HLSL, and it looks like the only thing it's doing is adding the slot mask and shadow mask effect. It doesn't even look like it's filtering the image or anything. And at a distance, there might be a distortion pattern, but I don't know. It looks pretty flat. There's no screen curvature hardly. There's a little bit. See, curved, uncurved. There's a little bit. Yeah, it's just minor. Okay, moving on. High quality 2x. This is similar to Super Eagle, meaning that it just it has a very heavy-handed approach to anti-aliasing, but it doesn't care about scan lines. It doesn't care about accuracy. It doesn't care about shadow mask. It's just like painting over it with watercolors or something. High quality 3 times, same thing. High quality 4 times, same thing. None of these look accurate to me. It's like I don't know what's up with these. Pillar box, I don't know. I'm gonna skip them for now. I'm sure there's some trick to fiddling with those. Now we're at unfiltered, which I don't know why that's in here because it's already unfiltered. Super 2 XBR doesn't look good. I'm going to just skip through a lot of these. There's so many, and most of them don't look good. They're kind of a waste of time. Keep on going. I'm just going to keep going until I see something decent looking. Don't see anything decent looking yet. Everything looks really distorted from the original arcade appearance. Okay, so there's only one effect that I like in here at all. Kind of, but not even really. And that would be either Bgfx default, because it just, it's a plain smooth image, but there's no screen curvature, there's no scan line, there's no aperture grill, there's no slot mask or shadow mask. This isn't accurate, arcade accurate, but it's a heck of a lot better than nothing. If you had a wimpy computer, maybe you would want this, it just smoothens the image up a little. But the other one on here that's okay is CRT Geometry Deluxe. But again, it's just too dark. Now, if you were to select this, could you tweak it? Yes, you can. Start using the down arrow key. So now we can adjust things like the strength of the mask. Instead of 40, maybe, take it down. It's too dark or something. See what I'm saying? Let's try it at 30. Now, come down here some more. Phosphor decay power, phosphor persistence, halation amplitude. So the halation's kind of like, the glowing effect, It was at 10 by default. Halation blur width. Curvatures, you can turn those on and off. The radius, the distance to screen, And with things like this, you can do cool things like tilt in Bgfx that you can't do in HLSL. So, see what I'm saying? So if you had a bezel that had, like, a space for a tilted screen, you could run Bgfx, choose one of these, and then once you've selected one, come down and play with the tilt values. So, Bgfx has some cool features. Rounded corner stuff, all these things. I am not going to go through every little display here, but I'm just trying to give you the idea of what you can find in there. So that's enough of that for now. None of these are going to look super arcade accurate. I mean, it'd be nice maybe if, there's a Timothy Lots Bgfx custom shader, but there's not. And none of these can match that, and they would require a lot of tweaking, and they might not even be able to do it. I don't know. I'm not trying to knock on Bgfx because it's supposedly less demanding, and some of this stuff looks pretty good, and it's got some neat features like tilt and whatnot, but I just want to cover it a little bit briefly. I don't want to get stuck in it. The video's already going on too long. That's Bgfx. Now, if you find one you really like in the Bgfx area, you would put, where's BGF? Here it is. Instead of putting Bgfx screen chains default, you would type in the name of the one you liked, and then it would just default to that instead of like the, like you saw where you had the array of choices and the default choice was on the one called default. So default was just slightly filtered. It looked like bilinear filtered MAME, and that was it. So, but you could put the name of the one you liked and save, and then it would load up to the one you like. Again, you could change shadow mask to slot mask or aperture mask if you wanted to as well. But yeah, that's how that works. So we're going to move on. So let's go ahead and look at GLSL now. So for Bgfx, it's okay, but not as good as HLSL in my opinion. Now we're going to look at GLSL. So for GLSL, these are OpenGL slang files. This is the kind of stuff that Timothy Lotz writes his stuff in. It's the kind of stuff you'd find for like RetroArch shaders commonly. So this is like the good stuff, the GLSL. We already know what HLSL is. It's not as popular as the OpenGL slang files. HLSL is pretty much a niche just for your standalone MAME, but OpenGL has more, as far as I can tell, capabilities and way more popularity, and all the best people who create shaders and know what they're doing use this GLSL format. So in standalone MAME, they have OpenGL specific shader options. It's like, great, okay, maybe we should look into that. So we'd come in here and put GLSL on, turning this 0 to a 1. Make sure that we have our HLSL disabled, so that's a 0. We'd come up a little bit and make sure filter and prescale are turned off. They're on 0. It actually does interfere and mess with these kind of shaders. I don't use those for HLSL either. I don't use these for anything, just so you know. All right, coming up, we got the area where we had changed the OSD video options to Bgfx. When it was HLSL, it was Direct 3D, remember? And now when it's GLSL, we put OpenGL, okay? So we just hit save. Now we come down to these GLSL options, and it's like, okay, well, which shader are you going to use? And then how it says shader, MAME 0, MAME 1, 2, 3, these would be shader passes. So it's like you pick one shader, right? And then you put the passes. You don't like put like, oh, this is this guy's OpenGL shader, and then the next one is, oh, that's another guy's OpenGL shader, and then the next one, oh, some third guy's OpenGL, because they'd be conflicting with one another. No, what you do is you pick one, and then if it happens to have multiple passes as part of its package, then you'd put them in the next line, and so on. So that's how that works. So anyways, you Google, some shaders and stuff, and then you get to your MAME folder, and here we go. In the basic MAME folder, you guys probably can't see this, it looks so tiny, but I created a new folder called GLSL, all lowercase, just right here in the main root folder. And then if you open that up, this is where you drop your folders that you find that you Google for. So I had one called CRT Aperture that I didn't really like. I had one called CRT Easy Mode Halation, which is a famous one that RetroArch users use a lot. I like it. It looks pretty good. But in MAME, it doesn't, I don't know, it could be a lot better. It looks good on like Sega Genesis games and stuff like that, or on Amiga games. For some reason, I don't prefer it for MAME. And then, what was OSD? CRT Geometry. Oh, this is the old, original kind of, GLSL CRT shader, like the first one. So it's out of date. There's so much better ones now and everything, of course. But then I was like, okay, let me get lots. That's going to be the best one. And yes, I've tried the Dr. Venom and the CRT Royales and all those. But maybe it's just a bias because I know that the guy's a professional and works for NVIDIA and freaking like invented TAA and all that. But I trust the Lotz shaders and I tend to like them more. So anyways, and they tend to hold up under scrutiny pretty good. There could be better ones. People who have even just used his and then tweaked it to improve it, perhaps. It's not like, making shaders for MAME is his day job or anything like that. But whatever. So if we go in here, basically this is the structure. If you're used to like using OpenGL shaders in RetroArch, you're going to think, what the heck is this? Because normally in RetroArch or something, the OpenGL shaders have a file extension of like .glsp. I believe so, like RetroArch, open file location, and then if we come up to the folders and go to shaders Glsl, I got a cough, and then we go to CRT, and we look. Here's CRT lots right here, and it's a .gls or .glslp extension. If you try to open it with a notepad, this is what you get. Shaders 1, shader 0 equals shader, CRT lots.glsl filter linear 0 equals false. I don't know what this means. Obviously, you can't even change anything in here by opening it up with notepad. I don't know how to edit that or convert this over, but it's different. It's a .glslp that won't work in standalone MAME, but does work in RetroArch. And those are the ones you find online everywhere, and the ones that are updated. But if you want just standalone MAME, like mame.UI 64 or whatever, you've got the MAME format for OpenGL language, which is .vsh, and then an RGB32 directory.fsh to go with it. And also, it doesn't automatically switch between horizontal and vertical orientation of things like the shadow mask effect. So they include the standard and then the vertical variant. But if you try to open something like this with a notepad, you get a little bit more to play with in here. And if you open this one, you get a little bit more to play with in here. However, I don't understand this type of programming, so I can't really tweak it like that or do any conversions. I'd have to learn that or something, and I haven't found anybody who's done one to take the latest, like, GLSLP, like RetroArch, OpenGL shaders, and convert them for standalone MAME in this .vsh directory.fsh format. So it's very hard to even find any cool GLSL shaders for standalone MAME. And then even the one I did find that's supposed to be a lot shader looks very outdated. Looks like something Lot's created back in the day when he was still trying to like figure out and perfect his shader method for this. But I went ahead and got it anyways. Took a good look at it. So anyways, here's how you do that. In mame.ini, under OpenGL specific options, down here where it says shader mame 0, you type in the directory for your GLSL shader of choice. So here the directory was inside the root folder, GLSL. Inside that folder, subfolder I named lots. And inside of that folder, the actual shader is a lots underscore CRT. And that accounts for the .vsh file. So we can close this now. All right. And GLSL is enabled with a 1. HLSL is disabled with a 0. And our OSD video option is now OpenGL instead of Direct3D or Bgfx. So we save. Now we launch MAME. And we're going to play Mortal Kombat here. And this is going to be Lots MAME GLSL shader. Turn that volume down. So this is, I think, an older version. I've seen so much other better versions on RetroArch, I think. So anyways, if we pause, it looks better than the Bgfx CRT Geometry Deluxe. I mean, it's flat, yes. And if you go to like your tilde options, you do not get options like you do in Bgfx to tweak it. So like, let's see, with GLSL in MAME, standalone MAME, you can't even, there's nothing under the white line. You can't even tweak them in here. And like I said, just trying to open a VSH or a directory.fs whatever H file, like I can't figure out how to tweak them. They just are what they are. So that's not so good. Is it better than this one that I just found? Better than the Bgfx, like, CRT geometry? I think so. I mean, this one's not curved, But putting that aside, a lot of people don't even like curved anyways. And when you curve things, it tends to create like those distortion patterns at a distance. But anyways, from that aside, it's like, okay, well, it looks pretty good, but let's see what it looks like up close. So that's what I did. I took a screenshot, and in GIMP, it is this one that's on here right now. I named it mame lots GLSL. Now, what happens when we zoom in really close? When we zoom in really close, what we can see, let me see if I can get my pen going here. We got a pencil. Okay, so what we can see is an RGB pattern. So you got your red pixeled area, okay? You got a green pixeled area, okay? And you got your blue pixeled area. So there's our RGB pattern. And below this red is another red. So it's not staggered, okay? It's right on one on top of the other. So from that, going over here, we know it's not a standard triad dot mask type shadow mask because you've got a red here, and then you have to go over a little to get the next red, and then back over to get the next red. So they're like diagonal, like that, diagonal, as opposed to, so it's like staggered. So right below red here, you have an offset of your green and blue, right? Whereas if it's a slot mask, they're just, right on top of each other. You got red, and right above that, you got another red, They're not, So anyways, now they're staggered this way as far as like here you've got some red, but then right next to it, it's raised up a little, so it's higher. It's up here, So there is some offset there, but it's different. So anyways, we know this is a slot mask pattern. So if we come back here, this is a slot mask pattern because the next red is only below it, separated by 1 pixel, and there's another red again. Okay, so because of that, we know it's the slot mask pattern. Now, what does the slot mask pattern look like up close? In MAME, this is what it's working with. This is what it would look like using like HLSL or something. Now, this is GLSL. So what it's doing, I guess, is handling it differently than HLSL does. And we'll get into that in a minute, I think. Or no, actually, this GLSL is actually pretty similar to HLSL's way of handling it. Now, the other thing we're seeing in this image is Scanlines. So this right here that I'm tracing here, this black that does like this, I'm not tracing it perfectly, but you get the idea. There's like this black line that goes across. And then right here, let me switch to white. And then there's this white line that kind of goes across like this. Probably can't even see it because it's already kind of white. And what that is at a distance, it is the effect of the scan line. In between is just shaded, the RGB, but shaded a little darkened. And so overall, at a distance, it kind of looks like the scan lines that you see going across, But it's broken up. It's not a solid line. It's kind of broken up, So anyways, that's what that is. That's what we're looking at here. So we've got what looks like a slot mask effect and some scan line effects. The colors of the RGB pattern are pretty accurate. It's just red, green, and blue with either the darker shade or the brighter shade, depending on how the scan line is interacting with it. Okay. Now, if we come over here, however, this might be a little bit different. Now, well, first I'm going to say I tried to emulate this. So what I'm going to do now is find one of my HLSLs that have the slot mask. Does this curves? No curves. So I'm going to find one of mine that has slot mask, no curves, and a thick scan line and no blur so that I can mimic this same thing. So, okay, so here's mine in HLSL that I tried to make look like lots in GLSL. So now this is lots in GLSL. Let me get the screen centered here. Okay, this is lots in GLSL in MAME standalone. This is mine in HLSL in MAME standalone to try to look like lots. Now there are better lots, and I will show you, and I made better HLSLs too, but right now we're just starting with the basic GLSL you can download for standalone MAME that's called MAME Lots GLSL. Okay, now up close, let's zoom in on lots again. So here's lots. Here's this green vertical line right here, which is the cursor around Kano. And then here's mine. And notice on mine that the green, let me get a dark color here. On mine, the green line, oh God, I'm on the wrong one. Control Z. Click here. There we go. The green line is just straight up and down, you know, right? But if you go over to lots, the green line, does it end here? Oh, let me click on his. Does it end here? Or does it end here? Because what you have is you have the green ending here and the red ending here, and in between is like a red and green mixture, kind of like a little bit of a orange in there. So you don't have a straight line where it's green and then red. Instead, lots GLSL has some kind of effect that I don't know how to do in HLSL, where it's merging the pixel on this side with the pixels on this side, and then creating some kind of, you know, mixture in the middle there. Okay, like a blend. So if you look at a distance, you can see this is kind of a fuzzy line, and then if you go to mine, it's a more sharp line, sharp and pronounced, fuzzy. So that's an effect I can't mimic in HLSL, at least I don't know how, that Lots figured out how to do in GLSL. And overall, so here's mine, and then there's his. Mine, although I have to get rid of the black lines there. But anyways, yeah. There we go. So mine, his, mine, his. So mine tends to look sharper, whereas his looks a little blurrier. Okay, but this is me trying to mimic this thing perfectly. If I didn't want to mimic this thing perfectly and I actually wanted to improve upon it, then what I had was a lot better. But before I move on to that, to show you, because I don't want to spoil it, I had a sneaky suspicion that this is not representative of Lot's best material. I think Lot's actually can do better than this. So I opened RetroArch and opened MAME in RetroArch and went ahead and used what I could find is a more modern variant of a Lot's GLSL file with more effects and stuff, and it was this one. Now this is way better. So this, let's see, the old one on GLSL and standalone MAME, and then the new Lots that it's in GLSL in RetroArch using the .glslp format instead of .vsh format. So this is standalone MAME with the .vsh. We'll zoom in. Okay, and then this is the RetroArch version with a .glslp format, and it looks so much better. Right now, this is the Lots that you want to try to mimic in HLSL if you're gonna do that. Because look, turn it off and go back to the old Lots standalone MAME GLSL. It's kind of a mess. The scanlines and everything look too dark. The image looks too sharp. Things are kind of a blurry mess. But if you turn on the one that's available in RetroArch, wow, that looks so much neater. The .triad thing going on here instead of the slot mask, for one. Now, does that mean that a dot mask triad effect is superior to the slot mask effect, or that the Wells Gardner monitors for Mortal Kombat used the standard dot mask shadow mask as opposed to the upgraded slot mask? You know, I don't know. I tried Googling and I can't find whether or not Mortal Kombat arcade cabinets use the slot mask or the dot mask. I tend to remember them looking like slot mask in person. So maybe this was just a design choice by Timothy Lots here to go with dot mask, or maybe he wasn't sure like which to go with. You know, some monitors had slot mask, some had dot mask maybe. So in this example, he's using dot mask, but in the other example, he was using slot mask. But even in this example, he's not using like true dot mask, because remember, true dot mask is more like circles. Well, in this case, they're squares. But true dot mask, these are slot masks, would be more like, remember the arrow with the little dots, all right? All the same height and everything. Whereas this, it's not. They're like rectangles. They're horizontally stretched. So like that's an interesting choice that he went with there. I wonder why. Well, anyways, you can do both. If you wanted the ones that look stretched like Lots here, you would just set in HLSL, you would set, let me turn this to be ready for HLSL. So direct 3D, and then come down here to GLSL. We're going to disable for now. We just already saw that. And then we are going to come down to HLSL, and we're going to enable. By the way, I don't use HLSL oversampling. It creates a weird artifact when you're trying to do this kind of accuracy stuff. All right, coming on down. So if you're trying to make, whether or not you're trying to make the rectangular shadow mask that lots use here in RetroArch, or whether or not you're trying to use ones that look more like even dots, like arcade realistic, the difference would be you would, instead of 12 and 6 for the lot style rectangular ones, you'd go 12 and 12, and that produces ones that look just like this. 12 and 6 produces ones that look just like this, where they're more like short and rectangular. And I know that because I did that to find out. So if I come down and I put, let's see, here's my final dot triad. I got final no curve scanline, final integer version, aperture version, slot version with curves. Where did I put it? Let me check my dot triad just to see where it says final dot triad. Yeah, see, this is one I made myself in HLSL, and you can see the dot triad. I keep saying triad. The dot triad is still the same as what Lots had in RetroArch's GLSL shader. So they're little rectangles. You know what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? Like 2 pixels wide, 1 pixel tall, blue. Same thing with green, same thing with red. And now if you go back to Timothy Lots in RetroArch, same thing. 2 pixels wide, red, green, and blues, 1 pixel tall, red, greens, and blues in the same pattern. So you can reproduce that in HLSL. But what you can't do in HLSL, as opposed to what you can do in GLSL, is you can't make it to where these are unaffected by other things that you're going to do. I'll show you in a minute. If you zoom out of this is, and remember, this is the RetroArch Timothy Lots, you'll see he has scanline effects on. You'll see he has screen curvature on. Now in MAME, let me turn off his and go back to mine. Everything's the same. I have scanlines on, but I don't have screen curvature on if I want to keep my dot mask looking like they should, where it's just red, green, and blue, 2 pixels wide, 1 pixel tall, just like his. If I turn on my screen curvature, let me turn that on, find it, final, so with curves. Here it is. Turn this on. Now look what happens to the image. All I did was add, see up here on the corner, right here, I added screen curvature. Okay, flat, zoom in, everything looks good. My RGBs are good. But if I add, like I did here, screen curvature in HLSL, all of a sudden my RGBs become RG browns and light greens and grays and all kind of weird things and become a big blurry mess. Now part of that is, it's like, well, how come that doesn't happen in GLSL for Timothy Lots, but happens in HLSL for me? Maybe that's part of that is the reason why Timothy Lots didn't ever make anything in HLSL that I could find. Because GLSL may be a superior in the sense that you can do screen curvature without distorting your shadow mask like this. Okay, so but in HLSL I have to make a choice. Do I want a shadow mask that just becomes a mess, or do I want to get rid of the curves, and have something that's a lot better? This is a slot mask, by the way. It's not a dot mask. Sorry. Here, do I want to get rid of the curves, and now I've got a good, shadow mask. By the way, this has Scanlines on. That's where the white line is here and the darker line. So I actually have one also that has no Scanlines or anything, very flat. Let's find that. So no curves or Scanlines, perfect integer scale and everything is this right here. So this is integer scaled. It has 0 curvature on the screen. It has 0 scanlines on the screen. It's just the best shadow mask I can create in HLSL with MAME. But that's using the 12x6 lot style rectangular ones. You can also do that with, without, these are with scan lines. Let me find them. Perfect shadow mask lot style. Okay, so yeah, here's the lot style that I created. But you can also do it like this. If you do 12 by 12 instead of 12 by 6, and they're more like what MAME intended, I guess. It's this, where they're all evenly the same. So you can do it that way too. And this is with no scan lines and no screen curvature. So the closer you zoom in, it still looks good. It looks like it should. Everything's fine. And at a distance, everything's fine too, but you don't have scan lines and you don't have screen curvature. And at a distance, you can't even see that shadow mask anyways. So back in the day, when realizing stuff like this, I'd be like, do I even really want to care about the shadow mask effect? Because it means I can't see it at a distance. Nobody watching on their phone is going to be able to see it anyways. And I have to lose the screen curvature and I have to lose the scan lines in order for it to look good. If you theoretically were ever to get a hold of a microscope and zoom in like this. But nobody's ever going to see that. Only I would know about that. So it's like, well, it's a trade-off. What's more important, And at the end of the day, it's probably more important to have the screen curvature and the scan lines, since you can't really, you know what I'm saying? It's something that's going to stick out more when you're playing at your normal screen distance. And it's all a gimmick anyways. This is not exactly what a real CRT monitor would look like with a standard, Delta Triad dot mask up close. It would look different. Let's be honest, it would look different. It would look more like this with the dots on the arrow, you see? And since it doesn't look like that, and this is just a gimmick anyways, and you can't see it far away, like your normal viewing distance, and having to turn off curvature and scan lines in order to get a perfect looking one when you were to zoom in, it starts to make me feel like it's not worth it. However, let's go ahead, and I forgot to show you perfect integer overscan flat, no scan lines. Perfect shadow mask lot style. There's another one. Here we go. Slot mask. So we were talking about the triad, this one, the dot mask, but also you can do this. You can get that. Remember what that's supposed to look like? Let's come back here and scroll down. It's supposed to look like this, okay? Up close. And this is what we get in for use in MAME. And the best I can do when zoomed in is this. So there's this compared to what it should look like, which is like this. Okay? So see, it's still a gimmick. It's never going to look as authentic as it should anyways, Now, maybe there's technology nowadays, but you'd have to have like the 8K monitor or something, obviously. But see, when you look up close, you're never looking at a game this way, this close. But yeah, it's accurate. But I had to turn off curvature and scan lines to get that. Now, what if I was to turn back on curvature and scan lines? This is what we get instead. Turn these off. I turn this off. All right, so now it's the same thing, slot mask, but I turned on screen curvature and scan lines, and now look at it. It's messier. See what I'm saying? So you got that. Let me go back and forth versus perfect slot mask. Where's perfect slot mask? Here it is, perfect slot. All right, perfect slot mask. Perfect slot mask with screen curvature and scan lines. It just becomes a gray, muddied mess. No screen curvature, no scan lines. Perfect slot mask. Ooh, pretty. But screen curvature and scan lines. Oh, ugly mess. But this is only up close. Now let's zoom back farther. Okay. Perfect slot mask. Screen curvature, scan lines. Now which one looks better? It's not so clear anymore, is it? Perfect slot mask. Screen curvature, scan lines on top of the perfect slot mask that normally up close would look like a big muddy mess. But now it's starting to look pretty good. I mean, okay, let's zoom back even further. All right. This is perfect slot mask on now. This is perfect slot mask off in favor of curvature and scan lines. Perfect slot mask, no curvature, no scan lines. perfect slot mask with curvature scanlines that mess up the slot mask effect. Is it even apparent which one's superior at this distance? Because again, if you were to zoom in, it's very apparent this one's better than this one, because this one's just a big old mess. Look at that mess. Doesn't look anything like it's supposed to be like a perfect slot mask. Boom, perfect slot mask. Now it's pretty pristine clean. It looks exactly how it should look. But when you go like all the way out and you toggle them off and on, the one that looks better is the one with the curvature and the scan lines. Because the curvature and scan lines is something you see better at a distance. The slot mask, shadow mask effect, you don't see unless your face is on the glass anyways. Okay? And it's still there. It's not like I changed the slot mask pattern or anything. It's just that when you curve the screen, it affects the slot mask pattern in HLSL. And when you add scan lines, it affects the slot mask pattern in HLSL, or the colors of it anyways. But let's look at what Timothy Lotz is working with in RetroArch in GLSL. Okay, so this is Timothy Lotz. Okay. And then I'm going to turn on mine. Let me find my final one. Oh, this is my final version. Okay. So my final version, Lotz's final version. Mine in HLSL, Lotz in RetroArch. But oh wait, this is RetroArch with Lotz integer scale. He also has one I made that's not integer scale. Maybe a better comparison down here. And by the way, integer scale doesn't even really matter. Watch, I'm going to turn, these are both Lotz, but one's integer and one's not. This is integer Lotz. This is non-integer Lotz. So non-integer means scaled without it being pixel perfect. And some people are really fussy about that. They demand that you integer scale. Otherwise, what are you doing? Because each pixel is exactly a perfect square. So let's zoom in really close on something like Scorpion's eyes or something in here. Okay, so this is a stretched Lotz one with no integer scaling. Okay, now this is the integer scaling Lotz one. Okay, no integer scaling, integer scaling. No integer scaling, integer scaling. Can you even see a difference other than one smaller? See, it's like, what's even the difference here? I mean, I know you can see a difference if you turn off all effects, that each pixel isn't exactly the same shape square, but it doesn't seem to have an effect on things like the slot mask effect. So let's zoom in on something to look at Timothy Lott's slot mask effect here. See the RGB, or his shadow mask effect. It's a triad, you know, slightly horizontally stretched. Now that's his choice. He does that. Maybe that has something to do with that effect we're talking about, where like he's blending the green here and the red here. It's not a perfect line. Everything is horizontally stretched to like merge. Maybe also that's what that is. I don't know what that is. But anyways, and so, but I was using, this is integer that we're looking at. We're looking at integer scaled now, and it still looks this good. Now let's turn off integer and zoom into the same areas. It's the exact same. This is non-integer stretch, but everything's still a perfect pixel, perfect pixel, perfect pixel, perfect pixel. And this is not integer stretch. It's because apparently in GLSL-P files, the non-integer stretching method doesn't have any effect on things like shadow mask filters. Shadow mask filters still integer scale even if you don't integer scale the regular game itself. So that's how it's handled in RetroArch's GLSL, at least for that effect. Now if we do it in HLSL, in MAME, like with mine, so let me turn on mine and turn off Lotz. Alright, so here's mine. This is not integer scale, but it's got the screen curvature, it's got the shadow mask, so everything gets messed up by the screen curvature and the shadow mask. It's not integer scale, but still pixel, one pixel, one pixel, one pixel, one pixel, one pen. It's all one pixel. They're all the same, as if it was integer, because we're talking about this thing right here. This is just an overlay. And it does not get stretched, I guess. It's just tiled, so that's why everything's still always the one pixel. So it does. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're using integer scale or not on things like this. It would matter on things like how tall is Kano's ear or something. You know, is it comprised of perfectly square pixels or not? But you can't tell anyways with all these effects on. So if you come down, turn off all the effects and make everything really flat. So let's see. No blur. right here. Let's turn this one on. And okay, you know, you still can't really tell because you're using this pattern right here, and that's what you're seeing when you look up close. Not the pixels that are not perfect square because it's not integer scaled. Well, you can. Okay, like right here. See, here's a pixel that's like 4 pixels, and here's one that's 2. Right, but it's only because it's covered up by the white of the scanline effect. All right, that's what that is. That's a scanline effect because we're on one that has scanlines. Um, I don't want this video to be like 5 hours long. My point is, when shadow mask is your priority, you get all kind of compromises you have to make, and you have to start figuring out what works and what doesn't, and what looks right and what doesn't. This is integer overscan, and it doesn't look right because it has curvature. So basically, at the end of the day, it always comes down to this. In HLSL, you can't get away with having perfect. Well, you can never have perfect shadow mask anyways on anything. I don't think. Even maybe with 8K you might, but still, you can't have it perfect anyways. But even the best you can do, which would be, let me find again, perfect shadow mask. Here we go. This is one I made where it's like, wow, look at that. That's perfect. There's no distortion. Each one is the way it should be. It's basically like this, okay? It's the way it's supposed to look. And then the same thing I did for like slot mask and stuff. Or even the lot style if you want the rectangular ones. There they are. They're there. Or if you want the, like I say, the slot mask. Right here. There's the perfect slot mask. What else? I've also got one that I tried for Aperture, which would be the this one, the Sony Trinitron. So if you want perfect Sony Trinitron in MAME and using only HLSL, I've got settings for that too. Right here, there's your Sony Trinitron. Here's your dot triad. Here's your what is this one? This is the lot style shadow mask, dot triad. And then this is the same thing but integer scaled. And when you zoom in, there's no difference anyways. Look, I swear there's no difference anyways. And if, like I said, if you're trying to count the pixels on Johnny Cage's ear up close to see how bad it looks non-integer scaled versus integer scaled. Okay, so here's integer scaled, non-integer scaled. Yeah, it moves around a lot because integer scale is so much tinier because it makes the screen smaller like that. See, doesn't fill the full screen. But we're not paying attention to that. We're just going to try to look and count the pixels like at the bottom of Johnny Cage's ear. Now we turn off integer scale and try to do the same thing at the bottom of his ear. You can't do it on either one because your your shadow mask is the only thing that's visible that close in. So for people who complain about, oh, the game must be integer scaled for accuracy, well, if you want so much accuracy that you have basically this when you get that close to it, or freaking this, or this. This is Trinitron, by the way. If you want one of these, right, that's how where you are about accuracy. This is the best you get. And it doesn't matter if you're integer scaled or not, because when you get really close, that's all you're going to see is your screen mask effect. So for some people, they go, you know what, screw it. I don't care about integer scaling anymore because it won't be apparent when you're using shadow mask, and I'd rather have an emulated shadow mask effect, done as best I can. Other people would say, you know what, I'd care more about integer scaling and ditch the shadow mask. And when you get in real close, you won't see anything that looks like a shadow mask, and it won't be represented at all. And maybe that's their cup of tea. And then there's people like me in the past where I said, well, because I don't want those Moire line artifacts, which I gotta show you because you guys probably like, what is he talking about, Moire line artifacts things? So I saved one, curve artifacts. Can you see them now? Can you see that now? I turned all the shadow mask all the way to full and scanline all the way full so that you could see the lines I'm talking about. So hopefully you can see. Wait, which one am I on? Here we go. Hopefully you can see right inside here that curve line here. Oop, Jeez, what am I doing? Okay, undo that. Okay. But there's like this curved line right here. I don't need it that big, jeez. Oh my god, my computer is running a little slow. All right, only because I've got so many layers and high-res images and things saved. I've been running my computer for a week in preparation for this video. But inside each one of these is like a weird artifact that you see when you scroll back at a distance, you know, and they're freaking everywhere. So it's kind of like these circles, you know, or whatever. And people will be able, if they're watching your videos on YouTube on their little phone screen, all they're going to see is these crazy artifact lines like that. And they're going to go, God, that's a mess. What is that? You know? And what that is trying to combine screen curvature with shadow mask. So in the past, rather than have to worry about that, here's my old HLSL that I used for years and used to give to people on links to descriptions in my videos. From far away, you don't see all that. Instead, you see some curve and everything looks okay. If you get in really, really, really close, you see scan lines. But if you get really close, you do not see any shadow mask attempt. I'm not even attempting to create shadow mask in the past because I didn't want those moire artifact swirly lines, you know? And because also people just won't see those anyway. Nobody's going to be able to get that close. And because even if you were able to see it, the best you can ever get is... let me turn this off. The best you'd ever be able to get is something like this, which is not as realistic. Let me do the, I want the one with the slot. Let me turn off these. Do I have a final slot with no scan lines? Final color correct. So I do somewhere up here. Perfect slot. There you go. Okay. So yeah, that looks cool when you zoom in. Sure, it does look cool. I'll grant you that. I like being able to create that effect as faithfully as I can. Like I say, it's not quite as faithful as this, but I mean, shoot, that's pretty freaking good, you know? But again, you're never going to see that because you're going to be seeing at distances like this. And at this distance, you can't even see that anyways. But it does look like something's missing when it's not there. When it's not there at all, it does look like, I don't know, like something's a little bit missing. So lately I've been thinking, okay, well, what if I want something that does have a little bit of it there, as accurately as possible, but then just says, screw it, it's faint enough that you can get away with maybe some moire effect, you know, at a distance if somebody's watching on a phone, but you still get your curve. And I came up with this. This is what I use now. And if you zoom in on it, it's got the perfect slot mask, but it is distorted by screen curvature. But it looks like something is there. And if you zoom back, you don't really see that moire effect much because the shadow mask is light enough, it's not dark, but it is present. If I had darkened it up, you'd see that. And on a cell phone, it might be visible. But let's look at, again, in RetroArch, not the integer one, but here we go. Lots. Okay, so turn mine off and lots on. We're going to go back and forth to see how different they even look. Okay, so here's, all right, this is lots in RetroArch, and this is mine in standalone mame with HLSL. I remember at the beginning of the video I told you I was going to try to recreate lots best shader for standalone mame using nothing but HLSL. That's what this attempt is. So this is my attempt, and this is the original lots. My attempt, original lots. Now the reason I can't get even closer to perfect is a couple reasons, 3 reasons. One, I don't know what kind of curvature algorithm he's using, but I can't match it in one-to-one in HLSL. His curvature is always slightly different than my curvature. I can't get it exactly the same, so you'll see there's like wobble from the curvature being different. Whatever, if we can put that to the side for now. The slot mask effect, or in this case, it's going to be turn mine off and his on. He's using the regular shadow mask. Do I have one? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do somewhere. Where's mine that has the regular shadow mask, not the slot? Jeez, I made so many of these stupid things. Can't find out which one's which. Where did I put it? Da, da, da. Lot style. Is that what this is? Yeah, but it's flat. It looks perfect like lots, but it's flat. See, look, you go back to lots, turn this off and on. This is mine. This is lots. Mine, lots. Come out a little further. Lots. Shoot, which one was mine? I lost it again. Oh, God. Here it is. Okay, mine, lots. Mine, lots. Mine, lots. It's like almost identical, dude. The only thing different is mine is flat without the curve. So because if I add curve, then mine goes from this to this, which would look closer to lots, which is this. However, if we zoom in really close, see, my stuff gets messed up unless I make mine flat. So then I'd get boom, like that, you know? But anyways, but what I've been showing is not the shadow mask. This is a slot mask. I got a shadow mask somewhere that's like my final shadow mask version. Where did I put it? Jeez. With skin. These are all no curves. With curves and skin lines. Daily use. Is this the one? Oh, this is the one, huh? Ah, yeah, this is the one. Okay, so I think so. This is retro lots, and then this is mine. Got it. Here we go. Perfect. This is what I meant to mention. Okay, so when at the beginning of the video I said I was gonna try to make a lots style, but in using my HLSL, but to look as close to lots as possible in RetroArch. So here we go. This is lots. This is mine. Mine is the one that has the bezel art on the side. Lots is the one that's black on the sides. In case we forget, going back and forth. So lots, mine. Lots, mine. Screen curvature is not going to be exactly the same. The color is slightly warmer on mine. I can change that very easily, but I'm not that worried about it because mine's actually more accurate to RGB, and his is slightly more accurate to what you'd usually find on a monitor, which is what I used to do. I would turn my blue exponent down or my blue power up just a slight, but I could do that. Anyways, long story short, zooming in. All right. This is lots in RetroArch. This is mine with HLSL. And you see how my shadow mask gets a little messed up? It's because of the curvature in HLSL. Whereas somehow Lots is able to get away with having curvature and not having it mess up his perfect little, shadow mask. I don't know. It's like something you can do in GLSL that you can't do in HLSL. In HLSL, when you add screen curvature, it bends and curves this stuff. Okay? That's undesirable. It warps that. It warps your shadow mask when it should leave it alone. So that's why GLSL is a little superior than HLSL. But again, in standalone MAME, if you look for GLSL lots, the only thing you find is this crap right here, which is not. I mean, that's a slot mask. See, sometimes lots uses slot mask, sometimes a lot uses dot mask. But anyways, still, this doesn't even have screen curvature, and it looks too dark. So, anyways, that's what made me have to go through all this work, because it's like I don't always want to play MAME in RetroArch. If I'm gonna play MAME in RetroArch, I'll just use lots shader, and this will be what I'm using. It'll look like this. It'll have curvature. If you zoom in, it looks pretty. Everything's cool. Everything's fine. No problem. Right? That's what you use if you're gonna play MAME in RetroArch. Just use lots GLSL shader. No problem. However, if you want to play MAME without RetroArch, just standalone MAME UI 64 or something like I like to do, you can't get this, There is no, that I know of, a perfect lots GLSL to drop in so that you can just run right here, like, lots GLSL that actually looks like this. Instead, you'll just find that old one, like this old crappy one down here. So I said, well, let me try to make my own that looks like this, like his good one, that will run in standalone MAME. And this is what I got. Okay, right here. So boom, 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 boom. Now, if I wanted to do it with no curves. Okay. 20 slot mask, 30 scanline, flat dark scan, 12 dot mask. If I wanted to do it with no curves, a flat version, I got that one somewhere too. Is it this one? Maybe it's that one. I guess this one has scan lines, but no curves. So if you zoom in on this one, you still see perfect. And then this one, this is the Trinitron, and this one is like lots, but it has scan lines. This one is no scan lines, no curves, and it's like lots. Here we go. So lots, mine, lots, mine. Zoom out a little bit. Lots, mine, lots, mine. Zoom out even more. Lots, mine. My flat variant, that is. Okay, this is my flat variant. But if I want my daily's current curved variant, it looks like that. Boom. Flat, curved. Flat, curved. Now the curved one also has scan lines. My flat one that I'm showing you has no scan lines, but I got one with scan lines. Here we go. Sorry about all that. Yeah, this one. Okay, so, all right. Flat, curve, flat, curve, flat, curved. And then Timothy Lotz and Derek Moores. Timothy Lotz, Derek Moores. So that's what we got basically. So I think it came out pretty good, you know. And you can decide what you want. You can have this. You're gonna have the flat version like that. But either one of these is gonna look closer to the great Timothy Lotz shader right here that we see here than anything else I can think of for standalone MAME using HLSL. And I'll leave links in description. And again, if you want to use, if you can find a better Lotz GLSL, like the one that's, the updated one that looks like it's supposed to, like this one that has, all of the best effects on it, and if you zoom in really close, you get a nice clean shadow mask and get your nice screen curvature, you get your nice scan lines and everything. And drop that right into standalone MAME and it worked just as good. That would be nice. But yeah, I can't find that. But in RetroArch, I can. That's where the screenshot came from. But in the meantime, if I want to use HLSL, I've got this right here. Now, do I want the flat one or the curved one? Like I said, it depends. What's more important, So, no curves with scan lines, or no curves and no scan lines, or even integer scaled with no curves or scan lines, So let's go. Integer scan, no curves or scan line up close. And then this is the same thing, only non-integer stretched up close. It looks the same to me, only it fills more of the screen. Because like I say, every pixel looks the same height anyways when it's all covered in a shadow mask effect. All right, so, and then there's this one, which is the same thing, but it's a slightly different shadow mask effect. Okay, and now scan lines are added. And then there's this one, scan lines, but this is also a slightly different effect. This is the Sony Trinitron effect, Not that you'd ever see Mortal Kombat on a Sony Trinitron unless you were emulating it through MAME on a Sony Trinitron at home or something. And then this is the slot mask, flat, but with scan lines. If you zoom in, the scan line messes it up, the slot mask effect a little with the blacks and the whites effects, but at least it's not warped because of the curvature effect, so let's get up close. But at a distance, it all looks the same in the wash anyways, so you might as well have this one, which is what I title Daily Use because it's my final version that has curves and scan lines, but the slot mask effect, is not that important, at the end of the day. Because you never see it that close, ever. You're always going to be like much farther away, like way out here, looking at it. It still looks good. So anyways, I think that should wrap up my video. I know this video went on way too long. But if anybody has any... oh wait, before I go, I should point out one more thing. Let's go back to Timothy Lott's RetroArch. Look at up here where it says choose your fighter. Look at this space in between the Y, O, U, R, right? Now let's go to mine. Look at this space. So Lott's, the O and U are so close together. Mine, they're more separated. His close together. So he's got some algorithm in GLSL that can mush everything together, which is like a mix, which is like what I said with this green distinction here, this green bar and the red to the right of it. See how mine's much sharper division? And then his is like mixing them together there. So whatever effect that is, that's the secret sauce, I think, to a lot of his tricks. So I don't know. Somebody needs to tell me like what's up with that. And if anybody knows of a GLSL that looks like this, like a proper LOTS that's ready to go, that I can download and put in my GLSL folder in standalone MAME, I will be one happy camper. Because I'll be the first one to tell you, when I play RetroArch, obviously there's no HLSL, and I'm not using my own settings in MAME for RetroArch. I'm using LOTS. Or if I'm playing like Sega Genesis, I'll use LOTS with a combination of a dither effect. You know, different things like that. Anyways, I think that I can wrap this video up now. And you guys remember how to do all this stuff. Like if you're using GLSL, it has to say GLSL enable right here to a 1. Point it to a path, and you have to make a folder called GLSL and throw your GLSL effect into that folder. And it has to be that .vsh format if it's standalone MAME and not like something like RetroArch. And then up here, you have to change Direct 3D to OpenGL if you're going to attempt to do all that, you know. Or if you're just like, after watching this video, says, yeah, your Direct 3D HLSL attempt to try to match the Timothy Lott's effect is pretty good. I think it looks good enough. Then yeah, put it on Direct 3D and then enable HLSL right there. And the settings that you'll be using is no oversampling. I do uneven stretch. I don't do integer because, like I said, you can't tell the difference anyways up close if you are using a shadow mask, because shadow mask takes priority over seeing that in the pixel size, and they're all evenly pixeled out anyways. But that's personal taste. People can be different on that. But anyways, yeah, and I also turn off the where is it? Filter and prescale. They do mess with that stuff a little and create some distortion. And since you're using the HLSL effects, you don't need that anyways. And then I have my shadow mask alphas at 30. The texture, if I want to use slot mask or shadow mask, it does make a difference. If I'm using shadow mask, you do 12 and 12 if you want it to look like this. But you do 12 and 6 if you want it to look like, where's Lots? Jesus, where's Lots stuff? RetroArch integer Lots. That's not the one I want. Here it is. Yeah. This is 12 and 6 to get the rectangles. Okay. So it would be 12 and not 06, just 12 and 6 like that. And then you'd have the Lots style shadow mask. If you wanted a slot mask, then you change it to that, and you would actually do 12 and 16. Okay? Because 12 and 16 will make it look like this. Or they make it look like this. Okay? Like I showed you, where's my perfect slot mask? Here it is. So if I zoom in, boom, see that? It looks like that. Okay? Same thing. No different. That looks like that. Same thing. No different. Okay? And that's 12 and 16. And even like the MAME guide or whatever says, example settings for slot mask, you can use 12 on the X count, but on the Y count, you can either use 8 or 16. 16 is what makes it look like what you commonly see, like right here. So that's if you're doing slot mask, all right, 12, 16. But if you're doing shadow mask, then you go 12 and 6 to get the lot style, or 12 and 12 to get the perfect even dot style, you know. And they're both acceptable. I don't think it matters that much. So like let's say here's the perfect triad that's even with the 12 and 12, and here's the perfect triad that's lot style with the 12 and 6. I think 12 and 6 looks cooler at a distance, so that's probably why Lots uses it. Because here's 12 and 12, look at Kano's eye. 12 and 6, look at Kano's eye. It just looks better. I don't know. That's could be personal taste. 12 and 12, 12 and 6, and slot mask. And also, I do have Aperture one I showed y'all earlier. Final Aperture. I'd have to turn these other ones so we can see it off. There's my Aperture. There's Kano's eye in the Sony Trinitron style. But yeah, if you have Aperture, it's just 12 and 12, and right here would just say Aperture-Grille, like this. There. And that would be your Sony Trinitron look. Out of all of them, I think I tend to like shadow mask with, oops, sorry, you gotta have that little hyphen. Shadow mask with the 12 and the 6. That's what Lots uses in his most recent shader for RetroArch. So it's the one I want to try to emulate the most. All right, and then down here, your shadow mask U and V size need to be 0.5. Now, in the past, these might have been some wacky numbers, or something in my old things that I passed around, because I didn't use shadow mask for those reasons where I say you don't see it at a distance anyways. It's always a gimmick. You can't really do it perfectly, especially on lower resolutions like 1080p. I used to have a 1080p monitor. Now I'm 1440. It's a little bit better. And then on the YouTube videos at a distance, you see the Moire effect. Anyway, long story short, you couldn't make it all work together. So I just ignored it. So I might have had whatever I was tinkering around with and just turned it off. So my shadow mask alpha was like 0. And then I'd pass it out for all the other settings, but not shadow mask. But had to rectify that with this video. So yeah, good settings. Shadow mask alpha 30. You can change that to what you like, but 30 is what I use. If you're doing the shadow mask pattern, it's 12 and 6. If you do the slot mask, shadow mask pattern, 12 and 6 for the lot style, or 12 and 12 for the basic generic style. If you do slot mask, it's 12 and 16. If you do Aperture Grill, it's 12 and 12. For the Trinitron. And then mask U and V size is 0.5 and the offsets are 0. Now the distortions, you have to turn distortions and rounded corners and all those off if you want a perfect, pristine looking shadow mask or slot mask or Aperture Grill effect zoomed in up close in HLSL. Because maybe not in GLSL, because somehow it doesn't affect it. But when you start distorting the corner and adding cubic and quadrant distortions in HLSL in mame.ini, then it does interfere and ugly up your shadow mask up close, as we saw. Like, where is it? Here, so you zoom in up close, and it doesn't look like a pretty little pattern anymore because the distortion from the screen curvature and the shadow mask. If we wanted to get rid of that, then it would look like this with no screen curvature. You zoom in up close, oh look, nice and pretty pattern again. But again, at a really big distance, which is more important, right? Like, which one's more important? This, which has under super close examination, nice pretty pattern of shadow mask, or screen curvature and Scanlines, which under super close inspection has a muddy shadow mask, but at the same time, at a distance, it looks better because it's got the curvature, it's got the Scanlines. And even, I mean, it's the best compromise we can make, because even if you go to Lots, I can find his again. Here it is. Go to Lots, turn it on, off and on. Looks about the same as my HLSL, doesn't it? Except for his color is cooler. Mine's warmer. I actually did one with a color correction. Right. Boom. There. See? Lots, mine. Lots, mine. Lots, mine. They're the same. I even corrected the color. But you see up there with the YOU, how they get smushed together with Lots smushed together, mine not smushed together. That he's got an extra anti-aliasing he can do in OpenGL that you can't do in HLSL, where it's like merging everything a little. So everything on his looks a little more ballooned out and soft, and anti-aliased. And it looks great, but I cannot, like, look at credits down at the bottom in green. All right, so Lots, mine, Lots, mine, Lots, mine. See, his is more ballooned out and aliased and glowy. You can't do that in HLSL, not that I know of. I mean, I could crank up bloom, but it's not going to or some other things, it's not going to create an effect that interesting. That's just something you can only do in OpenGL, I think. Now, MAME has the GLSL options, you know, but like I said, I don't know how to create those, and for the MAME standalone versions, and the only ones I can find are not that impressive. Even the LOTS one, it wasn't as impressive as the one for RetroArch. So anyways, people can comment what they want. This video is going on too long. Have a good one. If you got any questions, leave them in the comment. Oh, and for those of you who are wondering about that Sonic the Hedgehog waterfall effect, let's take a look at that real quick. While we're loading that up, I want to mention something else. At one point, I was talking about somehow Timothy Lotz was able to create like a merged effect of the image to where it was like blending together and made for a better anti-aliasing kind of bloom rounded balloon effect where that's kind of like, it's almost like phosphor bleed, maybe like he's bleeding the phosphorus into each other. There might be a way to do that in HLSL. I don't think so though. But anyways, okay, this is a mess. All right, let's get into this. Shaders. Let's turn them off for right now and go to load state where we have a waterfall. Okay, so here's the unfiltered waterfall that doesn't look right. It's just lines and then gaps where there are no lines, but it doesn't look like a full transparent waterfall. It just looks like an opaque line with a blank place right next to it and then another opaque line. Anyways, if you had RF cables or composite, you know, you'd get a better dithering pattern to where that's transparent. So anyways, go into our shaders down here. All right, turn them on. Go to load shader preset, GLSL for OpenGL. We will go to dithering and try a couple of them out. I already know some of these don't really work so well, but I will try them all just to show you the different effects. So here's Bayer Matrix. Nope, that's a big mess. No, thank you. Dithering. Here's CBOD version 1. And nope, still doesn't do it. So the next one down in dithering is GDAPT. Now we're talking. Now we're talking. Look at that. Nice and smooth, transparent waterfall. If you want to look at the other ones real quick. Dithering, Gin Dither. Nope, not a true transparency. So GLSL dithering, MDAP. Nope, MDAP also not a true transparent effect. And dithering, SGen PT mix. Now that is really, really smushed together transparent. This is like if you had RF cables. But it's just a little too blurry, if you know what I mean. Most of us probably were using composite cables by the 16-bit era. So what we would have would be more like the Gin Dither. So GLSL, dithering, sorry, GDAPT, right? Yeah, GDAPT is the best one because it's not too blurry. But with this, it's like, well, what about things like Scanlines and other stuff? Now, there's two ways you could do it. Either one, you could go to shader passes and increase it and then come down to where it says on this one NA and just pick something to help you with Scanlines and something. For example, GLSL, CRT, and let's go with the LOTS. Oh, I didn't apply it. Okay, so LOTS is on, but we gotta apply it. Apply. There we go. There we go. Now we've got a combination of LOTS CRT shader with Scanlines and anti-aliasing and shadow mask. Plus, hang on, Logan. I got a kid in the background being really loud. Plus, we have the GDAPT, which that dithering helps with the waterfall.